today I will be.
Sorry, Tahir, the sound is so like, yani, if you can raise your voice or get more closer to the speaker, because.
Okay, is it okay now? I think this is the closest thing I can get.
Yes, this is good now. Okay.
Okay. Today, like my presentation is going to be more of questioning things rather than giving information or talking about specific case studies. And it's something that I would like to propose to everybody available today. And it's the question: why should we stop building, and why education should redefine its structure towards not building anymore. First, I want to share with you this illustration that was done by Rem Koolhaas, and it's like a collage of all the skyscrapers of the like in the world, the famous skyscrapers in the world, and it's in a very desert-like area. And you know, Rem Koolhaas has been very critical about contemporary, modern, and postmodern and contemporary urbanism. His writings, for example, bigness, the notion of bigness, has been critical of the effects of modern urban planning on the logic of cities and how cities behave towards these brutal force of skyscrapers, of the modern ways of constructing, and how this has been had an effect on the detachment of people from their cities, from the mega cities, to be specific. And he has been writing also about a new ideology that has been going on, which is called the shopping mall ideology, that refers to the increased consumerist behavior that has swept the the late 20th and 21st century in megacities, and that spaces have become commodity rather than social spaces. And he also proposed or coined the term junk space, which is the remains of the modern and of modernization, from very small electronic devices to new cities, to on the fringes of mega cities, to luxurious houses. And this has been what he calls the junk spaces. And so our relationship with space has become a commodity. Space has become sort of a something that we can buy and sell. You know, it's not something that we share. It's become some sort of an anti-communal movement rather than something that rather than a shared resource among us. And at the same time, space and what's around it has become the site of a spectacle, something that that is very fancy and very luxurious, and we tend to watch it, you know, up close, rather than be part of it. We are not part of it. We are just subjects of that, like people, like in a movie. We just watch it from afar. And this is something that French philosopher Guy Debord has been talking about in his very famous book, The Society of the Spectacle. And he was also talking about the remnants of modernization, and how everything in the environment surrounding us has become a source of the spectacle. So how is this reflected on the education? So for me personally, I've been in the educational sector for the past 5 years, which I know is not that like I'm still considered the sort of a newcomer in comparison to my colleagues who have been at least 11 to 12 years. But I've noticed that there's a trend of mass education. There's a focus on statistics and numbers. Even students, like staff members, research, even students have been treated as statistics rather than potentials for creativity and innovation. I noticed that how universities treat, or specifically private universities in Egypt, they focus more on statistics, even despite their like what did sound is please try. Okay, sorry, I'm not sure. Is this good, or can you hear me well? Or
Would you raise your voice a little bit, Tahir, please?
okay, is it good like that, or
Yeah, perfect.
okay? So as I was saying that the math education was totally focusing on statistics and numbers rather than the potentials for being creative and being innovative. And this has been reflected in the like the architectural projects that students have been working on lately. So we I kind of noticed that the ideology and the intellect potential, there is a materialistic side of it. And I tried to sort of, in a very primitive way, to visualize this using AI. And I wrote like how you can see materialism of ideology and intellect. And it popped up students working in the library, and you have commercial shopping malls in the background. And so this is it's kind of sarcastic to see something like that, as now the policy has become more about fun learning at the expense of pursuing knowledge and pursuing intellectual value. And at the same time, the campus itself, in its current utopian image, it has become a source of social, economic, and political segregation. So when you look at the campus itself, the structure, the design, and also the ideology of the campus itself, it's there's a sort of like economic and social segregation between certain social classes and others. And it kind of resonated with me with the idea of the gated compounds that we have. So the campus and the gated compounds sort of behave in a similar manner, versus the just city, or the traditional city, or the city center, or whatever the naming is how it behaves or responds towards this newly financial ecology. So here we need to redefine the true definition of architecture. And the problem is that when we start teaching architecture, we start with buildings right away. We start with showing examples of buildings, but we don't take it from the bottom up approach, which is it's sort of it's more of network of spaces. It's the definition of architecture is how to create a network, and network in architecture is spaces. So it's more of like the horizontal ideology more than the verticality. And space matters, especially in our Arab culture. Space has a historical and a cultural importance. But this actually invites a question: why does Cairo ignore space despite its cultural importance? Why do we walk in the streets of Cairo? And I'm talking about Cairo, not in other Arab cities, because, well, first of all, because I live here and I know it's here. Second, because I noticed from the presentations previously, and also from today's, from Dr. Haytham and Dr. Muhyiddin, that some Arab cities have like started to realize the importance of this cultural value. But still in Cairo, if it's outside the informal or the framework of informality, space still has a depleting resource. It's not really taken into consideration, and that has been reflected also in education, as architectural education has been colonized in the past several decades. And I remember there was an interview with Dr. Abdel-Halim Ibrahim, Allah yarhamu. He was talking about his experiences in Cairo University during the late 60s, and how he was the way they were taught architecture was inspired by the modular that was proposed by Le Corbusier. And um, he was saying that this modular ideology, he takes the human dimension, or the human dimension, and he starts to refer all structures and all geometric architecture, geometric and spatial dimension accordingly. So here, architecture is not coming out of a spiritual or an organic kind of method. It's very static. It's a very measurable kind of relationship, which actually contradicts with not only what Dr. Abdel-Halim Ibrahim's work was or displayed later on, but but it also contradicts with our own kind of cultural and traditional ways of approaching space. And here I want to refer to a book called Anti-Architecture and Destruction by Nikos Salingaros. And Nikos Salingaros is actually a Greek mathematician originally, but he applied mathematics in architectural studies. And he was talking in his book about how some schools in Europe have shifted into deconstruction, the school of deconstruction, which the architectural deconstruction. And he was criticizing it very intensely and saying that it's a representation of post-scientific determinism, which is that what they're being taught to the students is that if you want to learn architecture, forget about being organic, forget about authenticity, forget about culture. We're talking about globalization. We're talking about how we need to make a grand image of architecture, how to make it a show off, emphasizing architects like Frank Gehry, like Zaha Hadid, like whatever. And he was criticizing these sorts of architects because his sort of approach, Salingaros' ideology, was more about the organic urban design fabric that actually created cities like Cairo. And he actually, in other articles, he was talking a lot about Cairo. And this takes us to questioning the human creativity. Is it about what is it that makes human creativity limited? And there is a very famous interview between the very famous philosophers Michel Foucault and Noam Chomsky. It was in the 1970s, and they were talking about human creativity and how politics has an effect on that. And they were talking about how some institutions that are not political, but they enforce politics. Politics is embedded in their policy. Like, for example, the universities. Universities are political by nature, in how they sort of inform students how to work and where to work and why to work. And if you don't work, or if you don't do these assignments, what's going to happen to you? The idea of grades and the idea of working inside a closed studio. And other philosophers were talking about the notion of the wall, of how walls can limit creativity, and they limit freedom of expression. And design studios, in many cases, I've seen, can be can afford this. So when I start to reflect what I've seen in the policies of architecture schools, I noticed that the way that architecture projects are being generated, the way students or the way architecture projects are being implemented inside the design studio is like most of the times it resonates or synonymous with what happens on the outside. And I call it like the culture of demolition, where the easy way out is to demolish all that is unwanted, and you start creating from scratch. And this creates a kind of a conflict or a sort of a geographical and place belonging conflict. Do I actually belong to this place or not? Does this project actually represent my approach or not? And I'm talking here about the student and also about the user. How does the market deal with this? It's a very vague thing. The market has sort of a political force on spatiality and on the aesthetics and the cultural aesthetics of the city itself. And here comes another question. What is the role of the architectural educator in the face of the market force? And so this is a kind of question that I keep asking myself. What is my role in the design studio? Is it to tell students how to do the job, or to tell them, don't listen to anybody, just do what you are convinced with? This is kind of dilemma that I always fall within. And so I start also like to think about why not architecture schools should shift their approach from the verticality to horizontality, from enclosed spaces to open spaces. Why not we have a course? We start with a small course about how to create spaces, or how to create very small, minimal interventions to redefine a certain space. These are some of the keywords that actually I never came across. Maybe once I've came across during my studies in bachelor. Liminal spaces, for example, transition spaces, in between spaces, spaces that hold so much social and cultural value, spaces that we use every day, but we're not really aware of. There is an intangible or a non-materialistic part of space. And I'm not talking about space that we use physically. I'm not talking about a desert like or highways or bridges, or no. I'm talking about spaces that only the social or society can understand its dimensions and its capabilities and the creative capabilities. And here in Cairo, we have witnessed the role of open spaces and how it can express micro voices. Society uses these spaces to practice their daily rituals, practice their daily routines, and express what they want to say. They can illustrate also the open spaces. They can illustrate how the community behaves in the face of brutality, in the face of the ecology of brutality, how people make use of the spaces, either in front of very static buildings, or in a very formal spaces like Tahrir Square, for example. People informalize the formal, and this is not a bad thing. This is also another thing that we need to ask ourselves: is informalizing the formal a bad thing? And why can't architectural schools implement or adapt the idea of informality and informal behavior and communal behavior in its curriculum? This is one or the only kind of experience that I had that dealt with this. Was a design studio at MSA in 2011. It was with Dr. Omar Nagati. And actually, I have to thank him because he's the person that inspired me a lot to and learned a lot about architecture and urbanism from him. and it was right after the revolution. So we had a lot of ideas and thoughts and creative ideas about how to deal with the community and how to deal with space. We didn't know anything about the idea of space until he came and taught this course to us. So our task was to redesign the in-between spaces in downtown Cairo, like the spaces between the buildings. And what we were doing is that we were studying and analyzing and observing the very informal kind of images in downtown Cairo, whether it was furniture or antiques or street furniture or the cafes or even people. And then we started to implement that and reflect it in our project. So each person, each student took an in-between space. Mine was a cafeteria, an informal cafeteria, and I started to like sort of put some light structure interventions inside this space to revitalize it. I did not build anything. There was no building. These are all like slopes or ramps or shades, and well, of course, it was not implemented in reality, but we kind of understood how actually a space can operate, how actually communities can work together with students. We actually went down to the cafeterias and to these spaces, and we started talking with the community and sketching around, sketching the ideas that we had, and also sketching with them what they had in mind about these spaces. So in the end, I want to ask two questions, or like three questions that actually come to my mind continuously. Do we as architectural educators and university policies, do we really foster creativity, or just gaze it? Like, do we put it in a sort of this spectacle kind of framework? And the idea of bridging theory and practice. Every time I hear this, I ask two questions. What is the nature of this bridging, and who will do it? Who will bridge the theory and the practice? Is it us, the educators, or the people working in the market? Because I worked before in the market in several offices. I never heard anyone from the practice saying we need to bridge the theory and practice with what we do. I always hear it from the theoretical perspective, that we need to bridge it with the practice. So who will do it in the end? So thank you so much, and I hope it was not too much. And thank you for thanks to Dr. Mohammed Fikri for the invitation, and thanks to Dr. Haitham for the very kind recommendation. And yeah, waiting for the questions and discussion.
Thank you very much